welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I also want to thank our loyal audience who has been with us since the beginning of this book club. I don't know if you are aware, but this month we are finishing the book The Prophet. It feels incredible, doesn't it? It seemed like it would never end, but here we are, it is done. We have been going through this cycle for almost a year now. You might remember that we started with the intention of helping people understand the Prophet more deeply with the invaluable support of philosophy. I always mention that everyone loves it. Those who have read it usually enjoy the Prophet a lot, but often understand little of it because so much is hidden between the lines. It is a complex work. So one day, I had this idea, and Tessalia, who was our director here in Guara, liked it. She thought it was interesting for us to start discussing it theme by theme, chapter by chapter. We are already quite far along this month. We should be finishing soon. This journey has been very enjoyable for me, and I hope it has been meaningful for you as well. Our reflection, almost word by word, on the book The Prophet has been a deep and enriching experience. To perceive, between the lines, just how much depth and meaning it generates. I always share with you that a true poet, I don't see how one could not also be a good philosopher, because a poet must possess both beauty in form and depth in content. They must have something meaningful to say and know how to express it beautifully. And Gibran fulfills this duality perfectly. He embodies both of these qualities with great mastery. So, he constantly makes references, even to Greek philosophers, suggesting philosophical insights that feel very familiar to us. It is fascinating because when you combine the deeper understanding, the poem becomes even more beautiful. Today's chapter is a very short one, a chapter that's about 1.5 pages long. Just to give you an idea, he speaks about love in only 2 pages, so forget it, nothing in Gibran is lengthy. Now, to speak about love in just 2 pages, you have to be extremely concise. If you stray or lose just 2 words, you've already lost something deeply meaningful. And here, he also addresses something quite significant. He speaks about all aspects of human life. Recently, we talked about dwellings, remember? About houses. Next week, we'll talk about laws. The week after that, we will talk about eating and drinking. In other words, he speaks about all the elements we tend to think of as mundane or simple, but to him, everything is imbued with great significance. And everything should be done in a humane way. So, what he's going to talk about today is quite interesting. Just to remind you, we always go over the basic biography, because there are always those joining us for the first time. Gibran was born in 1883 in Lebanon and passed away in 1931 in the United States. He arrived at a very young age in the United States. He was supported by an American teacher who, throughout her life, acted as a kind of patron to him, and, in fact, he said she was the great love of his life. Mary Elizabeth Haskell, who helped him immensely. He produced a body of work that extended beyond literature. He was also a painter, a very complete and profoundly thoughtful artist. He passed away and was taken back to Lebanon, where today his tomb is located in the same small town where he was born, Shari, and he is considered a national hero, not without reason, as he is truly one of the great figures, if not the greatest, in universal poetry. This book in particular, the one that brought him to prominence, is The Prophet, which, even when I began preparing this lecture, had already been translated into more than 40 languages. I am not sure what the number is today, but the fact remains that this is poetry, poetic prose. We live in a world where hardly anyone publishes poetry anymore. Poetry is read very little, and its audience continues to shrink. So, even though we may know many people who are unfamiliar with him, Gibran still has a remarkably large and loyal following, especially considering he is a poet. The idea now is not only to expand his circle of admirers, but also to deepen that admiration, to better understand what he sought to express. Since he was a boy, he dreamed of writing this book, The Prophet. He dreamed of the Prophet even as a teenager. Because he envisioned a book that, in a metaphorical and poetic way, would speak about everything he considered essential to human life. It is like a manual for living well, expressed through poetry, with each chapter dedicated to a different theme. We always point out, and I think it is important to emphasize, that it is a myth. What does that mean? A myth is when something is symbolic. Let me explain this to you, because we have 2 examples that make it very clear. Because recently we have had 2 films, one more recent and the other a bit older, but both quite beautiful. I believe many of you have probably seen them. One of them was Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Did you watch that musical? It came out last year. And the other one is much older, 1996, if I am not mistaken, which was The Phantom of the Opera. Did you watch that one too? You can see that both are beautiful, but if you take a moment to go deeper, there's a difference between them. Because in the more recent version of Les Miserables, Jean Valjean, who is the hero, is a moral example of conduct, but he is not symbolic. You don't have to look beyond what is happening. The story of Les Miserables is like a fable. It carries a moral message. It doesn't aim to suggest something else. Everything is already stated. It conveys that an honest man, principled and conscientious, can change the course of humanity. But there is nothing between the lines, nothing for you to interpret beyond what is shown. Now, The Phantom of the Opera, I am not trying to diminish Les Miserables, quite the opposite. I love both the book and the film. I found them wonderful. But in The Phantom of the Opera, everything is symbolic. That mask, those underground passages of the theater, the fact that her name is Christine, which relates to one who was torn between two worlds, the Crestos, the one divided between two planes. Everything there is symbolic. Everything has something for you to see through. That story was crafted by a writer named Gaston Leroux at the end of the 19th century, and he worked exclusively with classical symbols, the symbol of the underground, the symbol of the mask, the symbol of the point of no return, where the soul must choose between essence and appearance. Everything there is symbolic. If you only see the little story, it becomes a dull soap opera about a young girl who falls in love with a handsome boy. So understand that these are two different things. The Phantom of the Opera is a myth with symbolic content. Les Miserables is a fable with moral content. What is there to be said is explicit. There is nothing for you to see through. That name doesn't mean something beyond itself. In short, it is a fable. It has the structure of a fable, a moral theme. So here, what I want to make clear to you is that the prophet is symbolic. He is myth. This dialogue, which takes place within the prophet, is actually simulating the dialogue that takes place within the human being. It is the center of human consciousness when a person completes a life cycle, engaging in dialogue with all the events of their life, with all their smaller selves, as if it were a lives end reflection that a person undertakes. That is how myth works. Everything is happening within the human being. I always remind you that Jung used to say that dreams, well-structured dreams, the dream consciousness work the same way. All the characters are yourself. Those things you reject the most, those things you admire the most, everything there represents you. It is an internal dialogue. Myth is symbolic, of course. So, the story is essentially the story of a wise man, Al-Mustafa. He goes to a city called Acropolis to try to share some of his wisdom with the people of that city. He stays there for 12 years, and no one wants to listen to him. Then one day, he sees a ship coming from his homeland and says, "Great, now I will go back home." The island from which he had come. When the people realize they are going to lose him, they rush to him and says, "No, you are not leaving without teaching us something." 12 years. And no one wanted to listen to him. Now they decided to listen. Why? Because awareness arises through contrast. In the contrast between two colors, this is the example I always give, we become aware of both. If the entire universe were white, we wouldn't even perceive the color white. Here begins the color of wood. Through contrast, you perceive both, isn't that right? Here as well, blue and black. If the entire universe were blue, would I perceive blue? No. It is through contrast that awareness is born. Between sound and silence, will you come to understand the value of the things you have? Just when you lose them. You only see the value of life when faced with death. So, look at this. On the verge of losing Al-Mustafa, the people of the city realized they had a wise man among them and failed to make the most of that opportunity. And everyone gathers around him. 12 is a cycle. It is a number closely associated with the zodiac, representing a cycle of human experience. And Al-Mustafa represents, in this context, human consciousness engaging in dialogue, synthesizing all the wisdom he has gathered over a life cycle. Each chapter of the book, then, is a question that the townspeople ask him. And there is always, of course, a connection between the one who asks and the question being asked. So, he takes the things he considers fundamental to human life and expresses them within this story. And we will explore that. A chapter that is about marriage. There are various traditions that speak about this, and in fact, Gibran draws a bit from all of them, and we can clearly see the allusions. Sometimes you might ask me, where is she getting that from? Some of it I do infer, but there are other things that he explicitly states himself. Because he has a book, someday I will even give a lecture for you about this book. I don't know how I will manage to condense such a book into a single lecture, but I'll try. Because he has a book of letters that he exchanged with this person, Mary Haskell, throughout his entire life, more than 600 letters. And these letters were published. They were soulmates, truly two individuals who completed each other. And you can see him discussing everything he was doing with her, this book, the prophet, everything. Almost word for word. He would exchange ideas, take her suggestions. So, he clearly states where he is drawing his ideas from. Some things I inferred, other things I took directly from him. He himself clearly states where he got his ideas from. He draws a great deal of inspiration from both Greek philosophy and Eastern symbolism. He was, essentially, a man with a very broad general knowledge. And you can see him referencing everything from the West to the East, especially classical philosophy. So, he goes on to speak about marriage. I always like to give a brief introduction before we dive into the poem itself. If you look into it, marriage, couple, casalis. These come from Latin, meaning the place where you build a home. The word spouse comes from expandere, which means to consecrate, to bind through the sacred. It is something quite interesting. You may have seen this in certain religious traditions. When they perform a ceremony, you have probably seen this before. They take a space, set it apart, sometimes marking it in a circular shape with candles, and carry out their ceremony within that space. This is a very ancient practice, found in many traditions, both Eastern and Western, the idea of defining a space, illuminating it, and beginning from there. And then, gradually, you expand that illuminated space. It is as if you placed a lighthouse in the middle of the ocean at night. You illuminate that small space, and then you begin to expand it from there. Do you understand this? In other words, I create an ideal space for coexistence, where, with the human being in front of me, I will relate as two human beings on a higher level. Iona. And from the moment I begin to relate in this way with this human being, I start learning how to engage with all human beings. And I can extend this to all of humanity. This is where the idea of spandera comes in, of defining a space, of consecrating it. To begin from that union. To learn how to establish a deep connection with human beings. But it is not meant to stop there. If you consider the idea that humanity as a whole is one big family, then you must also consider that within us lies the potential to love 7 billion human beings. Within our hearts. Have you ever stopped to think about that? The potential to love 7 billion human beings. Then we take, influenced as we are by selfishness and a poor understanding of what love truly is, this 360-degree beam of our capacity to love, our heart, and we narrow it down to a single degree, focusing it only on the person in front of us. Do you realize that this is like a laser beam? Overwhelming. Anyone would be crushed. It is going to suffocate them. It is going to make the relationship heavy, because it is something you were meant to share with all of humanity. You were meant to share it with every step you take, in every moment of your life. And yet, you concentrated it all into a single situation. That is what turns it into a suffocating relationship. So, love within this marital relationship, the idea was for it to be a successful experiment in how to have a truly human relationship with another human being. Because from there, I would extend it outward. When I spoke to you, for example, about love, which is one of the most beautiful passages from the prophet, some of you were here, and it truly is a beautiful passage. I was telling you that, in the Middle Ages, they used to say, in medieval alchemy, which was another philosophical current, they said that love is a very refined wine, one that human beings are not capable of producing. What you can do is sculpt the chalice, so that the divine beings may look down from above. If they see that your chalice meets the standards, meeting the quality requirements, they will pour the sacred wine into it, which is love. But now, there is a characteristic. They said that this true, genuine love, the divine love that a human being channels, is channeled through a point, through a human being, through a relationship. But if it is genuine, from that point, it extends in all directions. They said that love is the al-qasd, the universal solvent. In other words, if it is truly good, if you truly love a human being, then through that person, you will become more fraternal with everyone, more attentive to everyone, more patient with everyone, more understanding with everyone, and not just with that one person. This love, which was channeled through the human being, will make you a better person overall. I was even mentioning to you that a Roman thinker named Cicero, he has a famous quote in a book called On Friendship, where he says the following: if you love and become more fraternal, more humane, more integrous, more generous, then you truly love. If you love and become more selfish, more focused on your own interests, more petty, then you do not love, nor does anyone who acts that way truly love. Do you understand? If I connect with another human being and that makes me a worse person, that might be passion, it might be attachment, but it is not true love. That wine has been adulterated. It is not genuine. Because true wine dissolves its boundaries and spreads in all directions. Do you understand that? So, from this, you can see what the idea of marriage was for these traditions. It was even said that there is no reason why marriage should be a religious celebration, and yet it always has been, all around the world. There is no reason. Except for the fact that human beings come together around the divine, around the material, they separate. Otherwise, it could just be a contract, a simple contract. Why has marriage always been a religious ceremony? Because it is said that around what is elevated, what is sacred, people unite. Around what is material, they divide. Imagine if I wanted to be fraternal with you by sharing this water. No matter how good my intentions are, if we try to share this water with everyone in this room, each person would get such a tiny sip that it wouldn't quench anyone's thirst. My intention was good, but the material world is very limited in terms of how much it can be shared. Now, if I am listening to a beautiful piece of music and all of you come in, you can all share in it. And the music doesn't become any less for me. I don't lose anything by sharing it. And if I am fraternal and I teach you about fraternity, do I become any less fraternal because of it? Do I lose anything? No. It is like a flame. If I use it to light someone else's flame, my own fire doesn't get any smaller. It is no coincidence that fire is the symbol of spirit and water is the symbol of matter. It is the cross of the world, the horizontal and the vertical. So, it is said that human beings come together around subtle, sublime, and elevated things. That is why there is the idea that a person only truly unites with another human being around something sacred. Hence, marriage would be a ceremony. There wasn't always a contract behind it, but the ceremony, the idea of the sacred, was always present, everywhere. It was considered essential because when centered on selfishness, people don't unite, they separate. It is as if you imagined everyone climbing a pyramid. If you find yourself getting closer to the person beside you, it is a sign that you're ascending. If you are moving away, look. You are probably going down, you see? The fact that you're able to understand and harmonize with other human beings means that you are growing as a human being, because this is inherent to the human condition as a virtue, as a value. So, he is going to speak from this perspective, and he will share some very beautiful things, powerful, but very beautiful, as always, right? For those who have been here on other occasions, was there ever a chapter from Gibran that was not powerful? Some of them were even devastating, right? Some of them were truly intense. So, Almitra was the priestess of the city. That is quite significant, because a priestess works precisely with the idea of consecrating the elements of life. And it is she who will ask this question. Then Almitra spoke again. She had asked about love earlier, do you remember? It was Almitra who asked about love. So Almitra spoke again and said, and what of marriage, master? And he answered, saying, you were born together, and together you shall remain forever. Always. In other words, this idea, you have probably heard that biblical phrase we often misinterpret, what God has joined together. Let no man separate. Remember that? We tend to think it is a command. If God joined it, you must not separate it. But it is not a command, it is a statement of truth. If something is united on the divine plane, no human effort will be able to separate it. It is a statement of fact, not a command. You will see that Plato talks about soulmates. I have even given a lecture on this topic. It is very interesting, except for the fact that afterward, everyone wants to ask me who their soulmate is. Aside from that, it's a fascinating subject. With that small caveat, he goes on to say that the human being exists in 3 worlds, and that there is the possibility for a human being to unite with another from any one of these 3 worlds. Greek tradition speaks of the nous, which is something very elevated within us, our principles, our values, the most spiritual part of us, our essence. Psyche, which is amor. They actually call it psyche, and there is even a myth by Apuleius about this character. And soma. You can see that we still have these words in our language. A somatic illness, a psychosomatic illness. He said the following: soma is the physical, dense part. A human being can unite through that. You can connect with another human being purely through the physical, purely through instinct. Or you can also connect through the psychic part. Or you can connect through that noetic or spiritual part. What is a union based solely on the physical part? It is something that is becoming more common nowadays. You can see that if we look back, not to be nostalgic, but if we go back 100 or 150 years, it was the height of romantic, psychological love. Today, we are at the height of physical love, the use of another person to provide you with pleasure. We have advanced so much in technology, but in the human aspect, according to the Platonic view, we have regressed. He says that when a union is made purely on the physical level with another human being, it is like the kind of union you have, for example, this is just an example. My own, not Plato's, so please don't misinterpret. It is as if we were the same kind of union you have with a chocolate bar. Who am I to criticize someone who enjoys chocolate? I would have no moral standing to do so. But just imagine, if I came up to you and said, "Do you like chocolate?" You don't have to confess, just pretend. Do you like chocolate? Then, you are going to follow a diet where you can eat as much chocolate as you want. Okay, will I lose weight? Yes, I guarantee you will. Do you know how? You can only eat chocolate. Chocolate and water, nothing else. On the first day, you will be really happy. How wonderful, white chocolate, dark chocolate, semi-sweet, crunchy, filled. On the second day, you won't be quite as thrilled. Chocolate, yeah, wow, that is nice, right? What else? Chocolate. And what else? Chocolate. By the third day, when you look at that chocolate, you will say, "Oh my God, chocolate again." And by the fourth day, you will stick to just water. You won't be able to take it anymore. Do you know why? The physical sense of taste, which is the most dense, becomes exhausted through repetition of the same object. Even if I am absolutely passionate about chocolate, just chocolate for 3 days in a row, no one can handle that. It becomes boring to the palate. When your connection is only on this level, even the human being in front of you becomes boring. You have already tasted it, already experienced it. It becomes depleted when it loses the flavor of novelty. Do you understand? So, you use and discard another human being like a chocolate bar. The taste wears out, it becomes tiring. Kant, a philosopher who came much later than the great classical rationalists, used to say that using another person as a means is one of the most immoral things there is. A means for your satisfaction, for your pleasure. Morality consists in always treating the other as an end, never as a means. So, when love is merely physical, you are using the other as a means. Now imagine we rise a little higher and establish a psychic love. What is psychic love? It is the union through psychological affinities. So I like chocolate. Me too. That is great. I like this particular movie. Me too. I enjoy traveling to that city. Me too. We are soulmates, born for each other. This leads to unions that are a bit more lasting than those based on the body. But notice something interesting. Psychic affinities, these likes and dislikes, are not even consistent within ourselves at different moments in life. Do you still like the same things today that you liked 10 years ago? And if both people don't share a common ideal, their tastes will begin to change in different directions. So, what sometimes even feels a bit forced, like when I start liking something just to say I like the same thing as the other person. What seems like a strong affinity today might mean nothing 10 years from now. They no longer enjoy the same things, they have drifted in different directions. So, over time, not just suddenly, but gradually, things begin to cool down, grow distant, sometimes becoming just a habit, losing their meaning and flavor. And what about unions, from the noetic point of view? Just so you can understand what they mean by this idea of being born together. I make this connection with Plato, which is very helpful. This is the idea of soulmates. The noetic union is, despite the difficulties we face, despite personality conflicts, when you witness an act of honor, of greatness, of nobility, your eyes light up. And when you look at your companion, their eyes are shining too. When you have the opportunity to do something grand for humanity, your heart ignites. And when you look at your companion, their heart is ignited too. In other words, you are united around values, virtues, wisdom, elements that are internal, justice, fraternity, and kindness. And this is something so interesting, because as I will live and seek goodness, I become more kind, don't I? And so does he. As I live and strive to cultivate fraternity, I become a little more fraternal. And so does he. So, what happens then? Both are drawn toward the same point, the same star. So, while in the psychological realm, time tends to create distance, in the spiritual realm, time brings people closer. Both grow in the same direction. Do you understand? So, he said that when this happens, because it can happen here, for example, between a father and a son, two friends, two siblings, who are united on a spiritual level and also share a psychological affinity, but have no physical connection. But it can also happen between a couple, a romantic union, and in that case, all three realms can be united. It is said that even the instincts come to partake in the soul's banquet. This is what they called a twin soul, or almitra. So, in truth, when it is said that what God has joined, let no man separate, it is because when the divine is united within two human beings, that divine bond endures even beyond the death of the body. That is why Plato said that love is either eternal or it is not love at all. Contrary to what our poet Vinicius de Moraes said, that love is infinite while it lasts, which makes for a good rhyme, but it's not a true solution. For Plato, love was either eternal or it wasn't love, because it unites two things that are themselves eternal. They were born together. Love is a recognition of unity. It is like the restoration of unity within multiplicity. Each one separated, in selfishness, each in their own corner. I found a missing piece of the puzzle, because the universe is one. One day, we will fit all the pieces together. I found another small piece of the puzzle. I recovered a glimpse of the face of unity. I reunited things that were once whole. One day, the entire universe will be whole again, but a part of that unity, I have reclaimed it now. A union of hearts above. Do you understand this? Then he says, "You were born together, and together you shall remain forevermore." In truth, when faced with death, we should take a stand before humanity and reflect on the following: those whom I have already managed to love. Mission accomplished. Those I have not yet loved, still a debt. I must fulfill that at some point, because it is said that the entire universe must be united through love. One day, it must be so. Moving on. And together you shall remain, even when the white wings of death scatter your days. Yes, together you shall remain, even in the silent memory of God. It is as if you understand that, in a certain way, up above. What you have united can no longer be separated. But the experience you live on earth in pursuit of this must be individual, yet shared. Each one must walk their own path, which is something he will speak about in depth later on. There is a very beautiful passage from his letters with Mary Haskell, in which he writes her a lovely letter, though, honestly, it is hard to say which one isn't beautiful. I quoted this same letter to you when we spoke about love. He says the following: Dear Mary, they all begin like that. Dear Mary, you are a very stubborn citizen. There are things that everyone could say, and I would still never believe them. One of them is that I have no soul. The second is that my soul can be separated from yours. And it is interesting because it wasn't just a theory. When he died, she went to the funeral. People arrived and were, because they exchanged letters, and no one even knew she existed. People were somewhat surprised because her face was light, joyful, while everyone else was immersed in tragedy. She felt that she had not lost him. How could she have lost him? She had the feeling that she was united with him on a level that no one and nothing could separate. People were shocked by her serenity. It was a profound experience. Plato says that those who love each other would wish to call upon the god Hephaestus, the blacksmith god of Greek mythology, so that he could fuse their souls into one, so that he could restore the union of souls. In other words, in a certain way, we recover what we have always been. And one day, we will all be united. In the heart of God, in the silent memory of God. But let there be space in your union, and let the winds of heaven dance between you. That is to say, letting there be space means we are seeking this. Have you ever listened to song? Actually, it is not just radio. I used to say that, but now I realize I am being unfair. FM radio is the same way. Pop song from any radio station, just tune in randomly. 99% of the songs will talk about love, romantic love. Usually, it has nothing to do with love. Sometimes it is even less than romantic. It is sensual love. And you have probably come across that famous line in every romantic song. You are everything I need to be happy. What do you think about that? Do you know what is everything you need? Yourself. Another person can walk alongside you, but the other person cannot. You cannot replace your spine with a crutch. You can't seek outside what you can only find within. They can walk alongside you, but they cannot give you yourself. They can help you walk together. This illusion leads to disappointment in relationships. Because he deceived me, she deceived me. No, you deceived yourself. The other human being is just that, another human being. What is missing in you is you. You can walk together. But if you expect the other person to give you yourself, know that you are something only you can attain. And inevitably, that will lead to disillusionment. Why? The other deceived me? No, you deceived yourself. I have already told you that famous saying my grandmother used to share. Today, I find it funny. At the time, I didn't understand a thing. At 7 or 8 years old, I would just stare at her, like, oh, okay, what does that even mean? She would turn to Mesh loved playing that game with me. I think she actually enjoyed the fact that I didn't understand. She would say, my dear, do you know the fastest way to get over a crush on someone? Do you know the fastest way to get over a crush? Marry him. Go all in. Because if you don't marry, the fantasy can feed the passion for a lifetime. But living together makes the fantasy unsustainable. What remains is what is real, what is mature. Fantasy does not survive coexistence. You see what I mean? She used to say that, and I didn't understand. Years later, I started laughing to myself. She wasn't even alive anymore. And I started laughing at that story. Because it is true, fantasy does not survive coexistence. But why? Because an illusion was built. The other person is not everything you need to be happy. What you need to be happy is your own essence, your deep identity. And the other can walk alongside you, can support you. Or they can also get in your way. You can help them. Or you can also hinder them. It can go either way. Do you understand that? So, forget the love songs from AM and FM radio. That doesn't exist. Love one another, but do not make love a shackle. Let there be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. It is as if you imagine that each human being is a drop of water, which is a classic phrase from Eastern philosophy, a drop of water seeking the ocean. Seeking unity. You can help another drop of water walk alongside you to find the path together. But don't think you can merge one drop into another and give up the ocean. In doing so, you are not being truly helpful to one another. When Gibran turned to Mary Haskell and said, "Your love gives me wings," there are kinds of love that cut off your wings. No, come on, don't say that. Life is just fine the way it is. Does your love give me wings, or does it cut them off? We walk together toward the ocean. It is not enough to merge into one another. The fusion of two drops is not the same as the ocean. And true union is the kind that helps us seek a greater unity. Fill each other's cup, but do not drink from the same cup. Give one another of your bread, but do not eat from the same piece. This is something classic, which bread and wine are putted in religious celebrations. Wine, through the presence of alcohol, represents fire, and bread symbolizes the bread of life. Both are the food and drink of the soul, nourishment for the soul. We can savor the nourishment of the soul together, but not from the same piece. If I am moved by reading something truly beautiful, or by a profound experience that deeply touched me, I can bring it to you, share it, so that you may resonate with me. But you will only resonate if you have reached the spiritual level necessary to look at it and truly see something. Sometimes I come across wonderful books that I deeply enjoy, and I give a talk about them or offer them for someone else to read. And if that person is not in the right moment to read it, they find it the dullest thing in the world. It is not simply about sharing in the sense of drinking from the same cup. That is not possible. What I have come to see, I achieved through my own longing to see. And if you have that same longing, you can see it too, and I can help you, I can encourage you. But if you don't have it, then it is impossible. I have often shared with you the story about Socrates' mother. In many talks, I have mentioned that once someone asked Socrates, "You are so wise, such a philosopher, and you speak so well. If I tie someone to a chair and you speak to that person for an hour, 2 hours, when I untie them, will they have become a philosopher, a lover of truth?" Do you remember what Socrates used to say in response? He would say, "My mother was a midwife. Fenaridi was an excellent midwife. But there was one thing she could never do. She could never deliver a baby from a woman who was not pregnant." It is not possible. If the other person is not pregnant with wisdom, drinking from my cup won't make them so. They must have filled their own cup, and then we can raise a toast together. It won't be by eating my bread that they will satisfy their hunger. They must have kneaded, worked, and baked their own bread, and then we can savor it together. I cannot pull them forward. That is an illusion we sometimes believe. Thinking, so-and-so will grow through my love. Look, they will grow through their own love for truth. And if that love isn't there, don't think it is contagious. This is not measles. Love for truth is something you attain through merit, through spiritual awareness, or you don't have it. It is not something you gain by being around who does. If it worked that way, it would be too easy. Stick with who has it and we would acquire it through osmosis. Either both have the capacity to distill their own wine, their own bread of life, and share it, or, in other words, savor it together, or one of them won't be able to be nourished. You have probably seen this. Throughout history, this has been the most common scenario, beings with a very high level of consciousness, paired with a companion who does not share the same level. Unfortunately, this is more common than the opposite. It is more common than the opposite. So, he will say, it is not possible to invade someone's inner world, where both believe they can live a single, unified life. That is not possible. Both must aspire to the heavens, both must seek their own soul, both must strive to become great. To find fulfillment not in the life of the other, but in their own life, and to encourage one another mutually. It is something interesting that, at times, we will see quite often. In fact, this very topic is related to that. Various traditions, Plato speaks extensively about this, suggest that the human being should be a link that would connect with another, one human being with another, until one day humanity would unite heaven and earth. This story, which is the story of discipleship, of masters and disciples, he spoke of it in this way. Each human being should be a link that intertwines with another and with another, and in the end would lift everyone upward so that all would rise together. If each human being must be a link, then a marriage is not the union of half a link with another half link. You are not half a link, you are a complete link. From that place, you are capable of joining with someone. Half a link cannot connect with anyone. A marriage is not the union of two half human beings, but of two complete human beings who intertwine like two rings, joining together and rising together. So, this idea that you are everything I am missing, it doesn't hold true. No, everything I am missing, I am myself. Sing and dance together and be joyful, but let each of you also be alone. Just as the strings of a lyre are separate, yet they vibrate in the same harmony. Have you ever thought about an orchestra? If all the instruments were stuck together, one on top of the other, there would be no symphony. Each musician needs their own space. And then they all play together. It becomes something truly magnificent. Sinfonos, many sounds in harmony, yet each one with its own distance, its own vital space, each one singing, dancing, and rejoicing. But let me not disrupt another step. Let me not cause another to lose their rhythm. Let me not interfere. The mystery of the other, may I contribute to the mystery of the other. May I allow them to perform their own dance. There was a very interesting thinker from the last century named Sri Ram, who used to say that life is like a dance, where you have been invited by a being, God, to join in a great dance with him. So, he says to imagine that everything around you, all other human beings, all elements of nature, everything, are arms, legs, parts of a great being, which is God. He is inviting you to a dance, and you must catch the rhythm. When he steps back, you move forward. When you step back, he moves forward. You must come into harmony with God through all of his many manifestations. In other words, harmony with life means not stepping on God's foot. It means coming into harmony with him, entering into that rhythm. So each person aligns themselves with the vibration of life, with the rhythm of life, and no one disrupts another's stance. Each one inspires the other, without interfering with or disturbing the other's rhythm. Do you understand? I inspire you, I don't block you. I take part in your mystery, I encourage you. I don't want to attract, I don't want to make you a spectator of my personal experience. I want you to find yourself, and I also want to find myself. And let's go together on this adventure. Give your hearts, but do not indeed entrust them to each other's truly keeping, for only the hand of life can hold your hearts. Including a certain degree of privacy, a certain degree of reserve, of mystery, which does not mean secrets that cannot be shared, but rather a certain level of inner life. You know that couple that reaches such a level of passion, of possessiveness, that if the other has a moment of solitude, of reflection, they ask, "What are you thinking about?" "Look, you are hiding something from me." Good heavens! That moment when you dive within yourself to do what Plato called the divine idols, a dialogue with your soul. If I see that this is that person's moment, I respect it. They have the right to that moment, and I should also seek it for myself. Remember that old song that said, "I want a house in the countryside"? It is as if you dive within yourself to cultivate the soil, and then emerge with fruits to share. Those who lack an inner life have nothing to share in the outer world. It makes relationships feel very empty, very superficial. I dive within myself and cultivate the soil. I have deep conversations with my soul and come out with wonderful things to share. Can you imagine what that would be like, considering that structure of the three worlds we talked about a little while ago? I reflected on justice, on love, and came to a remarkable conclusion. Let me share it with you. And that person resonates with it, enjoys seeing what you thought, and comes to their own conclusions. Then you move down to the psychic level. I saw an amazing movie. They resonate with it, go along with you, and even physically, they connect. On every level where a human being hungers and thirsts, they find a response in the other. But each one has their own hunger and their own thirst. I find it curious that sometimes this union doesn't happen in what is most intimate and profound. And union ends up being relegated to lower planes. That which is most sacred within you, you cannot share with the other because they won't understand. Isn't that strange? A solitude in what most deserves to be shared. So, only the hand of life can hold your hearts. There comes a moment when it is just you with yourself, and only then do you go out to share and live together. But do not cling too closely to one another, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak and the cypress do not grow in each other's shadow. Do you know what that Greek temple looks like? Don't you? 2 columns, and above them, a triangular pediment. This is quite interesting, because it is also symbolic. If you consider the various religious traditions of humanity, for example, have you noticed that the sacred is always associated with the number 3? A triad, a trinity. It is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, and so on. This reflects the idea that together you can uphold the spiritual world. To grow together, because if one falls behind, it creates imbalance. This column here will end up shorter. What happens to the pediment? It slips, it becomes unstable. So both support this idea together. Both rise together in parallel. To uphold the spiritual idea, one becomes greater because they are part of the other's life. In other words, the fact that you are in my life has made me a better human being. You have been a source of growth for me. We were able to elevate our values and principles higher because we grew together. The oak and the cypress cannot live in each other's shadow. They grow side by side. Plato, in a passage from a dialogue he calls The Statesman, speaks about a good fabric. A good fabric must have a stronger, more solid thread, which is the warp, and a softer thread, which is the weft. The two are interwoven, but neither ceases to be what it is. You have a good fabric when the warp and the weft are woven together. But the warp remains the warp, and the weft remains the weft. You have a fabric that is both soft and strong at the same time. Do you understand it? Do not give up your identity, because if you do not have yourself in depth, you will not be able to truly have anyone else in depth. This is a very basic parallel that Gibran is presenting here. Superficial people form superficial relationships. If I do not have myself, how can I have the other? And then a whole array of artifices is used to sustain that connection. Convenience-based artifices, habit-based artificesven. They sustain a certain kind of relationship. But that is not the idea of marriage, of spondera, of a union centered around the sacred. It is not the kind of relationship where you can say, thanks to this person, I became a better human being. This person gave me wings. Very beautiful. When Gibran at a certain moment says, Mary, what I love most about you is that every day you point me toward the top of a mountain. And even if you don't speak, I silently hear you saying, I would love to see Khalil up there tomorrow. I hear this from you every day. Not only do you point me to the mountain, you pull me up there. And that really is something remarkable. The relationship between the two of them. She is never satisfied. She never says, all right, you wrote the prophet. That is enough. No. She says, it was great, but you can still go further. Let's go together. Let's keep searching. Let's dive together into the mystery of life. You give me wings. Do you understand that? We become greater. We raise our shared temple higher because we are together more than we ever could alone. You are a source of growth in my life, and I am in yours. And that is when, Kasalis, we create a home, a sacred space. And from there, we can gradually welcome more and more of humanity into that space. That is the idea. As I mentioned to you, it is a very short text, just a page and a half. And every word, every little corner of it, holds this mystery of preserving your individuality. And at the same time, a deep sharing with the other in what is meant to be shared. Respecting the other's space while also diving into their mystery and growing together. For him, this is the essence of a true marriage, a celebration of what is most noble and sacred in us, our human condition. Through you, I learn to connect with humanity. I become more human. We grow together. We give each other wings. That is it. I will open it up for questions now, if you have any.